The day the inheritance was announced, my brother celebrated too loudly. He bribed the board to push me out, but when his forged contracts surfaced, the empire he tried to steal became the proof of his downfall. The room erupted before the words had even settled. My brother's voice cut through the air like a trumpet, loud and triumphant, as though the inheritance had been handed solely to him. Glasses clinked, chairs scraped against polished floors, and the board members exchanged uneasy glances. I stood frozen, watching him raise his arms as if he were already crowned king of the empire. His laughter was too sharp, too rehearsed, and it carried a weight that made my stomach twist. I noticed how quickly he moved, weaving through the crowd like a politician on election night. He slapped backs, poured drinks, and whispered promises into eager ears. "You'll see, things will change for the better," he told one of the directors, his hand resting firmly on the man's shoulder. The director nodded, though his eyes flickered toward me, uncertain. I stayed silent, my hands clasped tightly, sensing that my brother's joy was not born of gratitude but of conquest. It was then that Mr. Hale, an old family friend, tugged at my sleeve. His face was pale, his voice low. "He's been meeting with them," he whispered, glancing toward the board. "Private dinners, closed-door talks. He's buying loyalty." My chest tightened. I wanted to dismiss it, but the way my brother's eyes gleamed told me otherwise. His celebration was not about family, it was about power. Later that evening I returned home to find a thin envelope slipped under my door. No name, no seal, just a single sheet of paper inside. The words were blunt: "He bribed them. Contracts are being forged. Watch your back." My hands trembled as I read it again and again. The handwriting was hurried, the ink smudged, but the message was clear. Someone wanted me to know the truth. The next morning my brother's arrogance grew bolder. At breakfast with relatives he raised his glass and toasted himself. "To the future of the family empire," he declared, smirking at me across the table. Laughter followed, though not all of it was genuine. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, my cousin avoided my gaze. I forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness that rose in my throat. In the days that followed, his behavior became unbearable. During meetings, he dismissed my opinions with a wave of his hand. "We'll let the professionals handle it," he said, as though I were a child interrupting grown men. He mocked me in front of others, twisting my words, turning my silence into weakness. Each insult chipped away at my patience, but I refused to react. I knew anger would only feed his game. One afternoon I caught him in the hallway with two board members. He leaned in close, speaking in hushed tones, his hand sliding a folded paper into one man's pocket. When he noticed me he straightened, plastering on a smile. "Ah, sister," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "We were just discussing improvements." The men avoided my eyes, their faces stiff. I walked away, but the image burned in my mind. That night another letter appeared. This one was longer, more detailed. It listed names, dates, amounts, evidence of bribes, secret deals, and meetings held in private clubs. My pulse raced as I read it. Whoever was sending these letters knew everything. I locked the paper in my desk drawer, my mind spinning with questions. Who was helping me? And why? The tension grew heavier with each passing day. My brother strutted through the halls as though he owned them, his voice booming, his laughter echoing. He threw lavish dinners, inviting directors and shareholders, showering them with gifts and promises. I attended one of these dinners, sitting quietly at the edge of the table. He raised his glass again, his words sharp. "Some of us are ready to lead. Others, well, they'll have to adjust." His eyes met mine and the room erupted in forced laughter. I clenched my fists under the table, forcing myself to remain calm. Revenge was not served in haste. It required patience. I watched him closely, memorizing every gesture, every careless word. His arrogance was his weakness, and I knew it would betray him eventually. One small incident gave me hope. A junior accountant, nervous and pale, approached me in the corridor. "I shouldn't be saying this," he whispered, glancing around. "But I saw them late at night. They were altering records. Your brother's men. I didn't know what to do." His voice shook, but his courage lit a spark inside me. I thanked him quietly, promising his secret was safe. The whispers grew louder. Relatives began to avoid me, afraid of choosing sides. Friends hesitated to call. Even the staff seemed uneasy, their loyalty shifting under the weight of my brother's charm. Yet I remained steady, holding the letters close, waiting for the right moment. One evening as I walked through the garden, I overheard two directors speaking near the fountain. "He's promising too much," one said. "It doesn't add up." The other replied, "But he's convincing. And she's too quiet." My heart pounded. They doubted him, but they doubted me more. Silence had become my shield, but it also made me invisible. I returned to my room, staring at the letters spread across my desk. Each word was a weapon, each detail a crack in his armor. My anger simmered, but I forced it down. I knew the time would come when I could strike, but for now I had to endure his celebration, his arrogance, his endless parade of false victories. The empire was not his yet. And though he laughed too loudly, though he mocked too freely, I knew the truth was waiting. Hidden in ink, whispered in corridors, carried in trembling voices. His celebration was only the beginning, and I would be ready when the end arrived. The silence after his laughter was heavier than any storm. I had stood in the garden the night before, staring at the letters spread across my desk, knowing they were weapons waiting to be used. But when the board summoned me the next morning, I walked into that room with a calm face, though inside my chest thundered. The long table stretched before me, polished wood gleaming under the harsh lights. 12 men sat around it, their expressions carefully arranged, their voices clipped and rehearsed. I could see it in their eyes. My brother had already poisoned them. One of them cleared his throat, reading from a paper as though it were scripture. "We've reviewed recent developments. For the stability of the company, we believe leadership should be reconsidered." I felt the sting immediately. My brother leaned back in his chair, arms folded, a smile tugging at his lips. He didn't need to speak. His victory was written across their faces. Humiliation burned through me, but I refused to let it show. I straightened my shoulders, forcing my voice to remain steady. "You've been bought," I said quietly. "And you know it." The words hung in the air, but no one dared respond. My brother finally leaned forward, sliding a stack of papers across the table. "You signed these," he said smoothly. His tone was calm, almost mocking. I picked up the contracts, my eyes scanning the signatures. My name written in ink, but not by my hand. My stomach twisted. He had forged them. I looked up, meeting his gaze. "You think this will hold?" I asked. He shrugged, feigning innocence. "It already has." The meeting ended with their decision to suspend my authority. I walked out of that room with my head high, but inside I was boiling. Betrayal had cut deep, yet it had also lit a fire. I knew I couldn't fight him openly, not yet. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that would turn his arrogance into his downfall. So I began to move quietly. I met with loyal employees in hidden corners, away from prying eyes. In the storage room, behind stacks of dusty files, I spoke with an old clerk who had served my father. "He's paying them," the clerk whispered. "Cash, favors, promises. It's all hidden in the accounts." His hands shook as he handed me a slip of paper with numbers scribbled across it. I listened to whispers in the corridors, piecing together fragments of conversations. One director had suddenly purchased a new estate. Another had debts mysteriously cleared. Each clue was small, but together they painted a picture of corruption. One evening as I walked through the dimly lit hall, a young accountant stopped me. His face was pale, his voice trembling. "I shouldn't be saying this," he whispered, glancing around nervously. "But I saw them. Your brother's men. They were in the records room late at night, changing figures. I didn't know what to do." His words struck me like a spark in dry wood. I placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," I told him. "Stay quiet, but keep your eyes open." His courage gave me the first real proof I needed. The betrayal weighed heavily, but instead of despair, I felt determination harden inside me. I remembered my parents, the empire they had built with sweat and sacrifice. This was not just about me, it was about protecting their legacy. My brother wanted to erase me, but I would not let him erase them. The struggle grew fiercer in the weeks that followed. Every meeting was a battlefield. He spoke with confidence, twisting facts, presenting forged documents as truth. I countered with questions, forcing him to explain details he couldn't. The board shifted uneasily, caught between his charm and my persistence. One afternoon I cornered him in the hallway. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice low but firm. He smirked, leaning close. "Because I can," he whispered. And because you're too weak to stop me. His words fueled my resolve. Weakness was not in my blood. I began to plan carefully, gathering scraps of evidence, building a case piece by piece. I knew I couldn't rush. Every move had to be precise. Small incidents kept me going. A secretary slipped me a folder she claimed had been discarded. Inside were receipts for lavish dinners, all billed to the company but signed by my brother. Another employee handed me a note, detailing a suspicious transfer of funds. Each act of quiet loyalty reminded me that not everyone had been bought. The boardroom became a stage for our silent war. He strutted in with confidence, his voice loud, his gestures grand. I sat quietly watching, waiting, letting him believe he had won. But beneath the surface I was gathering strength, preparing for the moment when his lies would collapse under their own weight. The betrayal had cut me deeply, but it had also sharpened me. I was no longer the quiet observer. I was the hunter, moving in shadows, waiting for the right time to strike. My brother thought he had stripped me of dignity, but he had only given me purpose. And so I carried on, each day a battle, each night a plan. The fire inside me burned brighter, fueled by anger, by loyalty, by the memory of my parents' legacy. I knew the struggle was far from over, but I was ready. Ready to fight, ready to endure, ready to reclaim what was mine. The fire inside me had been burning for weeks, but it was his arrogance that finally gave me the opening. One careless mistake, one forged contract left too exposed, and suddenly the cracks in his empire began to show. I remember the moment vividly, the boardroom heavy with silence, papers spread across the table, and his face tightening as I slid the evidence forward. The forged signatures were undeniable. My name scrawled in ink, but the strokes too sharp, too rushed. I held the contract up, my voice steady. "This is not mine," I said, letting the words echo. The directors shifted in their seats, their confidence faltering. My brother's smirk wavered, though he tried to mask it with bravado. "She's lying," he snapped, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I didn't stop there. One by one I laid out the receipts, the altered records, the testimonies of employees he had bullied into silence. Each piece of evidence was a stone, and together they built a wall he could not climb. The room grew colder with every revelation. Shareholders demanded explanations, their voices sharp, their patience gone. He tried to fight back, raising his voice, slamming his fist against the table. "This is nonsense," he shouted. "You're all blind." But the louder he grew, the smaller he seemed. His words no longer carried weight. They carried desperation. I watched his downfall unfold not in a single moment, but in a series of small, cutting incidents. One director, once his closest ally, stood and walked out, refusing to be part of his lies. A loyal employee, trembling but resolute, spoke up in front of everyone, recounting how she had been ordered to shred documents late at night. Even family friends, the ones he had charmed with dinners and promises, turned their backs, their silence louder than any accusation. The empire he tried to steal became the very proof of his corruption. Every ledger, every contract, every whispered testimony was a mirror reflecting his greed. He shouted, denied, threatened, but the walls closed in. His voice cracked, his hands shook, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. I stood tall, not with loud celebration but with quiet strength. Revenge was not served through rage. It was served through truth. I didn't need to raise my voice. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Yet even in his downfall he tried to cling to power. "You'll regret this," he hissed at me as the board voted to strip him of authority. His words were venom, but they no longer pierced me. I met his gaze calmly. "No," I said. "You will." The vote was unanimous. His position dissolved, his influence shattered. The empire he had schemed to control slipped from his grasp like sand through clenched fists. He stormed out of the room, his footsteps heavy, his pride broken. I remained behind, the weight of victory pressing gently against my chest. It wasn't triumph in the way he had celebrated. It was quieter, deeper, more meaningful. I thought of my parents, of the legacy they had built, and I felt a sense of justice. In the days that followed, the echoes of his downfall spread. Shareholders demanded restructuring, employees whispered relief, and the air in the company shifted from tension to cautious hope. My brother's name became a warning, a reminder of arrogance and betrayal. One small incident stays with me. A janitor who had worked in the building for decades, stopped me in the hallway. His eyes were kind, his voice soft. "We knew you'd stand strong," he said. "Your father would be proud." His words carried more weight than any boardroom vote. My brother tried to salvage his reputation, sending letters, making calls, pleading with those who once supported him. But doors closed, phones went unanswered, and his charm no longer held power. He had built his empire on lies, and now those lies had buried him. I didn't celebrate with parties or speeches. My revenge was not loud. It was quiet, steady, and complete. I walked through the halls with calm dignity, knowing the truth had prevailed. One evening, I returned to the garden where I had once stood, staring at the letters spread across my desk. The air was cool, the sky painted with fading light. I thought of the journey, the whispers, the betrayals, the endless nights of planning, and I felt closure. Revenge had been served, not through violence, but through patience, through truth, through the strength to endure. My brother's downfall was his own creation, and I had simply held up the mirror. As I left the boardroom that final day, I carried no bitterness, no lingering anger. Only satisfaction. The empire was safe, the legacy preserved, and my place reclaimed. I walked away quietly, my steps steady, my heart calm. The battle was over and I had won, not with noise but with truth.